Ma'am, step out of the vehicle now.
I'm sorry, what's the reason for this
Step
stop?
out of the vehicle. I don't care who you think you are.
I need to understand the legal basis for this detention. Am I being accused of a crime?
You people always think you know the law. Open the door or I open it for you.
Under what articulable facts are you initiating this seizure?
Ma'am, step out of the vehicle. The voice came through the driver's side window with the flat, rehearsed authority of someone who'd said it 1,000 times before. The parking lot was nearly empty now. Just a few stragglers from the evening shift walking toward their cars under the amber glow of sodium lights. I'm sorry, what's the reason for the stop? Step out of the vehicle. Now. The woman inside didn't move. Her hands remained visible on the steering wheel, her posture upright but still. She wore a navy blue warehouse polo, the kind with a small logo stitched above the pocket. Her ID badge still hung from a lanyard around her neck. I need to understand the legal basis for this detention, she said calmly. Am I being accused of a crime? The agent, mid-40s, buzz cut, tactical vest over a polo shirt, leaned closer to the window. His jaw tightened. You don't get to ask questions. You answer them. Step of the vehicle. Under what articulable facts are you initiating this seizure? The second agent, younger, standing near the passenger side, let out a short laugh. Articulable facts? Lady, you've been watching too much TV. She didn't respond. She didn't look away. She didn't reach for her phone. The older agent's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. You're making this harder than it needs to be. She met his eyes through the glass. No, she said quietly. You are. It was a Thursday evening in late September, just after 6 p.m., in the parking lot of a logistics warehouse outside Gary, Indiana. The facility sat less than 10 miles from the Illinois border, a sprawling distribution hub where hundreds of workers processed freight shipments bound for the Midwest. The lot was industrial-grade asphalt, cracked in places, with faded yellow lines and a single entrance monitored by a board security guard in a booth. The shift change had just ended. Workers streamed out in clusters, pulling off gloves, adjusting jackets, checking phones. The air smelled faintly of diesel and cold concrete. Overhead, the sky was dimming into that particular shade of gray that settles over the Rust Belt in early autumn. The two men who approached the silver Honda Accord weren't local police. They wore no uniforms, but their tactical vests, earpieces, and the federal agency insignia on their shirts made their affiliation clear. They were part of a joint task force, federal agents operating under the umbrella of immigration enforcement, customs interdiction, and what the agency broadly categorized as cross-border trafficking investigations. The older agent, Special Agent Dale Richter, had 17 years with the agency. His personnel file included 3 letters of commendation and 2 formal complaints, both dismissed after internal review. One complaint alleged racial profiling during a vehicle stop in 2019. The other cited excessive force during an interrogation in 2021. Neither resulted in disciplinary action. Richter had a reputation. Among peers, he was considered aggressive but effective. Among defense attorneys in the region, he was known for stops that barely passed legal muster and reports that were meticulously written after the fact to justify whatever had already been done. His partner that evening, Agent Kyle Deming, was newer, 4 years in, eager, still learning the rhythm of fieldwork. Deming deferred to Richter on almost everything. The stop was supposed to be routine. According to the incident report filed later that night, the agents were conducting targeted surveillance in the area based on intelligence reports of alleged smuggling operations linked to warehouse employees. The report did not specify what intelligence. It did not name a source. It did not explain why this particular vehicle, driven by this particular woman, was flagged. But the stop happened, and what followed would eventually involve federal court depositions, subpoenaed body camera footage, internal affairs investigations, and a settlement large enough to make regional news. The woman behind the wheel was Janelle Holloway, 34 years old, a logistics coordinator who'd worked at the warehouse for 6 years. She lived in Chicago's South Side, about 40 minutes away when traffic was light. She had no criminal record, no outstanding warrants, no ties to any investigation. She was also an attorney. But the agents didn't know that yet. And for the next 18 minutes, they would treat her like every other person they assumed had something to hide. Janelle Holloway hadn't planned on being a warehouse worker. She'd graduated from Northwestern Law in 2015, passed the Illinois bar on her first attempt, and spent 3 years working for a mid-sized civil rights firm in downtown Chicago. The work was meaningful. Police misconduct cases, housing discrimination, employment disputes, but the pay was barely enough to cover her student loans. By 2018, she was burned out, underpaid, and watching colleagues leave for corporate firms at twice the salary. So she pivoted. She took a logistics coordinator role at the Gary warehouse. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. The pay was decent, the hours were predictable, and it gave her time to think about what she actually wanted to do with her law degree. She kept her bar license active. She still read case law in the evenings, still followed civil rights litigation, still believed in the work she'd left behind. But she didn't advertise her background. At the warehouse, she was just Janelle. She wore the same uniform as everyone else, clocked in at the same terminals, ate lunch in the same break room. Her coworkers knew she was smart. She'd help with union grievances sometimes, or explain a confusing policy memo, but most assumed she'd gone to college for business or management. She never corrected them. On the evening of September 26th, Janelle had worked a full shift, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., coordinating shipments, resolving delays, managing inventory discrepancies. It was tedious work, but she was good at it. She clocked out at 5:48 p.m., walked across the parking lot under the dimming sky, and climbed into her Honda. She was tired. She had groceries to pick up on the way home. She was thinking about dinner. She was not thinking about federal agents. When the two men appeared beside her car, she didn't panic. She'd been trained not to. During her time at the civil rights firm, she'd represented clients who'd been stopped, searched, detained, and arrested without cause. She knew the language. She knew the law. She knew exactly what rights she had and exactly how those rights were routinely ignored. So when Agent Richter told her to step out of the vehicle, she didn't comply. Not because she was defiant, because compliance without legal justification is how violations become normal. She kept her hands visible. She kept her voice calm. She asked the question every person in America has the right to ask. Why? Richter didn't answer. He repeated the command. Louder this time. His hand drifted toward his belt. A subtle but deliberate movement meant to signal authority. Deming circled to the passenger side, peering through the windows, scanning the interior. Janelle didn't move. I need reasonable suspicion of criminal activity before I'm obligated to exit my vehicle, she said evenly. Do you have that? Richter's expression shifted. Not quite anger. More like irritation mixed with disbelief. He leaned down, closer to the window, close enough that she could see the small scar above his eyebrow, close enough to smell the coffee on his breath. You people always think you know the law, he said. You people. Janelle felt it, the familiar weight of those two words, the casual contempt embedded in them. But she didn't react. She'd heard worse. She'd cross-examined worse. I don't think I know the law, she said quietly. I'm asking you to follow it. Deming tapped on the passenger window. Ma'am, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. She turned her head slightly, just enough to make eye contact with him. There's only one way, she said. The legal way. Richter straightened up. He glanced at Deming, then back at Janelle. His hand moved to the door handle. Open the door, he said, or I open it for you. Janelle took a slow breath. She could feel her heart rate ticking up, but her hand stayed steady on the wheel. She was about to be detained, and she was going to remember every single word. The door opened with a metallic click that echoed across the empty parking lot. Richter didn't wait for her consent. He gripped the handle, pulled it wide, and stepped back with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. The interior dome light flickered on, casting pale yellow light across Janelle's face. Out. Now. Janelle stepped out slowly, deliberately. Her legs felt stiff after the long shift, her lower back tight from hours of standing. The evening air was cooler than she'd expected, carrying the faint smell of oil and rubber from the loading docks. She could hear the distant hum of trucks idling on the far side of the lot, the occasional metallic clang of a gate closing. "Hands on the vehicle," Richter said. She complied. Her palms pressed flat against the cool metal of the roof. She could feel the slight vibration from the engine, still ticking as it cooled. Her ID badge swung forward on its lanyard, plastic tapping against the car. "What's your name?" "Janelle Holloway." "Where are you coming from?" "Work." "Where's work?" She nodded toward the warehouse, less than 100 yards away. The building loomed behind them, its exterior lights just beginning to flicker on in the growing dusk. "Where do you live?" "Chicago." Richter's eyes narrowed. "Chicago? You drove here from Chicago." "I work here. I live in Chicago." "Why?" Janelle turned her head slightly, just enough to see him in her peripheral vision. "Why do I live in Chicago?" "Don't get smart," Richter said. "Why drive all the way out here?" "Because that's where my job is." Deming moved around the front of the car, his boots scraping against the asphalt. He was younger, maybe early 30s, with the kind of clean-cut appearance that suggested he still ironed his shirts with military precision. He held a small flashlight, though the sun hadn't fully set yet. "What's in the car?" he asked. "My belongings," Janelle said. "Be specific." "My purse, my jacket, a water bottle, registration and insurance in the glove box." Richter stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his presence behind her left shoulder. "You mind if we take a look?" "Yes," Janelle said calmly. "I do mind." The silence that followed was deliberate. She could hear Richter's breathing, slow and controlled. She could smell his cologne, something sharp and synthetic, mixed with sweat and the faint odor of gun oil. "You got something to hide?" he asked. "I have a Fourth Amendment right to refuse a search without probable cause," Janelle said. "Do you have probable cause?" Richter let out a short, humorless laugh. "You've been sitting in this parking lot for 15 minutes? "I clocked out 7 minutes ago," Janelle interrupted. "I walked to my car. I got in. You stopped me before I could leave." "We've been watching this location," Richter said, his voice hardening. "Smuggling operations. Contraband moving through warehouses just like this one. People just like you. People just like you." Janelle felt the words settle into her spine, cold and deliberate. She kept her hands on the car. She kept her breathing even. "What specific, articulable facts led you to believe I'm involved in criminal activity?" she asked. Deming crouched near the rear passenger window, shining his flashlight inside. The beam swept across the back seat, empty except for a reusable grocery bag and a gym duffel she hadn't touched in weeks. "She's got a bag back here," Deming said. "It's a gym bag," Janelle said. "What's in it?" "Workout clothes I haven't used in 2 months." Richter moved to her other side, positioning himself so she'd have to turn her head to see him. A classic interrogation tactic. Force the subject to divide their attention, create discomfort, destabilize their composure. "Here's what's going to happen," Richter said slowly. "You're going to consent to a search or we're going to detain you while we bring in a K-9 unit. Your choice." Janelle's pulse ticked higher, but her voice stayed level. "A K-9 unit requires reasonable suspicion of narcotics. Do you have that?" "I have suspicion," Richter said. "Reasonable suspicion requires specific, observable facts," Janelle said. "What are they?" Richter's jaw tightened. She could see the muscle working beneath his skin, the way his eyes narrowed just slightly. He wasn't used to this. Most people folded by now. Most people either consented out of fear or escalated out of anger. Janelle did neither. "You're making this very difficult," Richter said. "I'm exercising my rights," Janelle replied. Deming stood up from the passenger side, brushing dust off his knee. "Boss, we've got the authority." "I know what we've got," Richter snapped. He turned back to Janelle. "Step away from the vehicle." She hesitated. "Am I under arrest?" "You're being detained." "On what grounds?" "Suspected involvement in smuggling operations." "Based on what evidence?" Richter stepped forward, close enough now that she could see the tiny red veins in the whites of his eyes, the slight sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cool air. His hand rested on his belt, fingers drumming against the leather. "Based on the fact that you're acting suspicious," he said. "Based on the fact that you're refusing to cooperate. Based on the fact that I'm a federal agent and I'm telling you to comply." Janelle met his gaze. "Acting suspicious isn't a crime. Refusing an unlawful search isn't a crime. And your authority doesn't override the Constitution." The parking lot was almost completely empty now. The last few workers had driven off. The security guard in the booth was too far away to see what was happening. The warehouse exterior lights hummed softly, flickering in that irregular way that old ballasts do. Richter pulled out his phone. "Fine. We'll do this the long way." He made a call, ostensibly for a K-9 unit, though Janelle suspected it was theater. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. He didn't give a location. He didn't provide details. He just said, "Yeah, need a dog at the Gary site," and hung up. "How long is this going to take?" Janelle asked. "As long as it takes," Richter said. He leaned against the front of her car, arms crossed, making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. Deming walked a slow circle around the vehicle, his flashlight still on, sweeping across the windows, the wheel wells, the undercarriage. He was looking for anything, scratches, dents, modifications, anything that might justify what they were doing. He found nothing. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The temperature dropped. Janelle's arms began to ache from standing in place, her shoulders stiff from tension. She didn't ask to sit. She didn't ask for water. She knew better. At the 40-minute mark, Richter's phone rang. He answered, listened, frowned. "K-9's tied up on another call," he said, hanging up. "Could be another hour." Janelle said nothing. Richter pushed off the car and walked toward her. "Or you could just consent, we take a quick look, and you're on your way." "No," Janelle said. His face darkened. "You're really going to make us wait out here all night?" "You're detaining me," Janelle said quietly. "This is your choice, not mine." Richter's hand moved to his cuffs. The metal glinted under the parking lot lights. "Turn around," he said. "Am I under arrest?" "Turn around." "What's the charge?" "Obstruction." Janelle's stomach dropped, but her face didn't change. "Obstruction of what investigation?" "Turn around." She did, slowly. Her hands moved behind her back without being told. She'd seen this before. She knew what came next. The cuffs went on tight, tighter than necessary. The metal bit into her wrists, cold and unyielding. She felt the ratchet clicks, 1, 2, 3, each one snapping the restraints tighter. Her fingers tingled as circulation slowed. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. Richter leaned close to her ear. "No," he whispered. "You are." They walked her to the federal vehicle. A black SUV parked 20 yards away, its windows tinted dark. Richter held her arm just above the elbow, his grip firm but not brutal. Deming followed behind, carrying her purse, which they'd removed from the car without her consent. The rear door of the SUV opened with a heavy thunk. The interior smelled like stale coffee and vinyl. Richter guided her onto the seat, and she sat awkwardly, her cuffed hands pinned behind her back, the pressure already building in her shoulders. Deming climbed into the front passenger seat and began rifling through her purse. "Ma'am, do you consent to this search?" he asked, an absurd question, given the cuffs. "No," Janelle said. He kept going anyway. Wallet, lipstick, keys, receipts, a small notebook. Then he pulled out a slim leather card holder. He opened it. His face changed. Boss." Deming's voice was quieter now, uncertain. Richter was leaning against the open door, typing something into his phone. "What? You need to see this." Richter walked over, irritation flickering across his face. Deming handed him the card holder. Richter looked down. Inside was a bar card. Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. Active status. Janelle Marie Holloway, ESQ. Richter stared at it for 3 full seconds. His jaw slackened. His eyes flicked up to Janelle, then back down to the card, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. "You're a lawyer?" he said. "Yes," Janelle said calmly. The air inside the vehicle seemed to contract. Deming shifted in his seat, his hand still holding her purse, frozen mid-search. Richter's face went through a sequence of expressions. Confusion, disbelief, then something closer to dread. "Why didn't you say something?" he asked. Janelle tilted her head slightly. "Would it have mattered?" Richter didn't answer. He looked at Deming. Deming looked at the floor. "You need to uncuff me," Janelle said. "Right now." Richter hesitated. His hand went to his belt, fingers brushing the key ring, but he didn't move. "You've detained me without reasonable suspicion," Janelle continued, her voice still calm, still controlled. "You've searched my vehicle without consent or probable cause. You've arrested me without articulable facts supporting a criminal charge. You've violated the Fourth Amendment, and you've done it on camera." Richter's eyes darted upward. The parking lot, the warehouse, security cameras, his body camera, Deming's body camera. Janelle saw the realization wash over him. She could almost hear the internal calculations, the report he'd have to write, the questions his supervisors would ask, the depositions that would follow. "This is a civil rights violation under color of law," Janelle said quietly. 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. You've created federal liability for yourself, your agency, and the city. Every second I remain in these cuffs increases the damages. Richter's hand finally moved. He pulled out the key, stepped forward, and unlocked the cuffs. The metal released with a soft click. Janelle brought her hands forward slowly, rubbing her wrists where the cuffs had left red marks. She could feel the blood rushing back into her fingers, the dull ache spreading up her forearms. She looked up at Richter. He said nothing. Deming stared straight ahead through the windshield. The parking lot was silent except for the distant hum of the highway and the soft buzz of the overhead lights. Janelle stepped out of the SUV. "I'll need my belongings," she said. Deming handed her the purse without a word. She walked back to her car, got in, and drove away. Neither agent tried to stop her. Janelle didn't go home that night. She drove straight to a 24-hour Kinko's in Hammond, printed every relevant statute, policy document, and case citation she could pull from her phone, and began drafting a formal complaint. By 2 a.m., she had a 12-page document outlining every violation, timestamped to the minute, cross-referenced with federal case law. By 8 a.m. the next morning, it was on the desk of a senior attorney at the ACLU of Illinois. By noon, it was in the hands of the agency's Internal Affairs Division. By the end of the week, it was a federal lawsuit. The agency's initial response was predictable, defensive, dismissive, bureaucratic. A spokesperson issued a statement describing the stop as a routine investigative detention consistent with agency protocol. The statement mentioned ongoing smuggling investigations and officer safety concerns. It did not mention Janelle's profession. It did not mention the lack of probable cause. It did not mention the illegal search. But the body camera footage told a different story. When the footage was subpoenaed 3 months later, the agency fought the release. They claimed operational sensitivity. They claimed privacy concerns. They claimed the footage was part of an ongoing investigation and couldn't be disclosed. The judge didn't buy it. The footage was released in redacted form to Janelle's legal team in January. By March, excerpts had been filed as evidence in federal court. By May, a local news station had obtained a copy through a Freedom of Information Act request. The video went viral within hours. And inside the city attorney's office, the air went out of the room. Internal system monologue the moment the city's lead attorney, Roger Feldman, watched the footage for the first time. He knew the case was over. He sat alone in his office on the 9th floor of the municipal building, the blinds half closed against the late afternoon sun. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. The video played on his desktop monitor, 18 minutes and 43 seconds of absolute, indefensible liability. He watched Richter refuse to provide reasonable suspicion. He watched Janelle ask, repeatedly, for the legal basis of the detention. He watched Richter's voice drip with condescension. You people always think you know the law. He watched the illegal search of her purse. He watched the handcuffs go on. He watched the moment Deming found the bar card, the pause, the silence, the sudden scramble to undo what had already been done. Feldman paused the video. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the frozen image of Richter's face, caught mid-realization, his expression somewhere between panic and denial. There was no defense. None. No reasonable officer could claim they had probable cause. No jury would believe Janelle posed a threat. No judge would accept articulable suspicion based on nothing more than her refusal to waive her rights. Worse, she was an attorney. She knew the law better than the agents who'd detained her. She'd documented everything. She'd stayed calm. She'd created a perfect evidentiary record. And she was black. Feldman closed his eyes. The optics were catastrophic. A civil rights attorney, detained without cause, handcuffed in a parking lot, searched illegally, all while invoking the Constitution in calm, precise language, and the agents had dismissed her, belittled her, and doubled down on the violation. The city had no defense. The insurance carrier knew it too. Within days of reviewing the footage, they sent a terse email to Feldman's office. Settle immediately. Do not go to trial. We will not cover a verdict. Feldman called the agency's general counsel. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. How much? The GC asked. 7 figures, Feldman said. Minimum. There was a long pause. She's asking for what? $7.8 million. Another pause. Feldman could hear papers rustling on the other end of the line. That's insane, the GC said. It's justified, Feldman replied. False arrest, unlawful detention, illegal search, Fourth Amendment violation, civil rights deprivation under color of law. She's got emotional distress, reputational harm, and punitive damages. A jury will give her more. The GC exhaled slowly. What about the agents? Richter's been placed on administrative leave. Deming's under review. Internal Affairs opened a full investigation. Disciplinary action? Likely, but it doesn't matter. The liability's already locked in. The city settled 4 months later for $7.8 million. The announcement was buried in a Friday afternoon press release, between a Parks Department budget update and a road construction notice. The agency admitted no wrongdoing. The settlement included a standard confidentiality clause, which Janelle's attorneys negotiated down to allow her to speak publicly about the incident. Richter resigned 6 weeks after the settlement was finalized. Deming was reassigned to desk duty and quietly left the agency 8 months later. The warehouse parking lot, where it all began, remained unchanged. Same cracked asphalt, same flickering lights, same security guard in the booth. But the footage remained, and the precedent remained, and the cost remained. $7.8 million. For 18 minutes, the case became a teaching tool. Law schools added it to civil rights syllabi. Police academies used the footage in training sessions on constitutional limits. Civil liberties organizations cited it in policy briefs arguing for stricter oversight of federal agents operating in local jurisdictions. But the broader questions remained unanswered. Janelle Holloway had the education, the training, and the professional credentials to recognize what was happening to her and respond appropriately. She knew the law. She knew her rights. She knew how to stay calm under pressure, how to document violations, how to preserve evidence. Most people don't. Most people comply out of fear. Most people don't know the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Most people don't know they can refuse a search. Most people don't have bar cards in their wallets or civil rights attorneys on speed dial. And the system knows this. The system depends on it. Agents like Richter operate in a space where the vast majority of people they stop will either comply immediately or escalate emotionally, both of which justify further action. Calm, informed resistance is so rare that when it happens, the system doesn't know how to process it. Janelle disrupted the script. She refused to be intimidated. She refused to be confused. She refused to give consent that would later be used to justify the stop retroactively. And because she refused, The entire machinery of post hoc justification fell apart. No consent meant no legal search. No legal search meant no evidence. No evidence meant no justification. No justification meant civil liability. Civil liability meant millions of dollars and ruined careers. The system had no firewall. It had relied on compliance. If this can happen to an attorney, someone trained to navigate legal systems, someone with institutional knowledge and professional credentials, what happens to everyone else? What happens to the warehouse worker who doesn't have a law degree? What happens to the teenager who doesn't know the word articulable? What happens to the immigrant who's been told their entire life that refusing an officer's command is dangerous? The footage of Janelle's stop has been viewed millions of times. The comment sections fill with the same questions over and over. Would this have ended differently if she wasn't a lawyer? How many people go through this every day and never get justice? How many agents are still out there doing the same thing? The answer, of course, is that we don't know. We only know about the cases that make it to court. We only know about the people who had the knowledge, the resources, and the endurance to fight back. The rest remain invisible. And the agents who stopped them, they're still working, still stopping cars, still asking questions they have no legal right to ask, still betting that the next person won't know what Janelle knew. The real question isn't whether the system failed. It's whether it was ever designed to succeed. If you found this story important, consider subscribing. These cases don't surface by accident. They surface because someone knew their rights and refused to let a violation disappear into silence.